Well, it's part of it.
Love trains.
I love trains too. One of my laments about living in America is we don't have the train system that they have in Europe.
Yep, I rode all through Germany, southern Germany, on the train system, and I just loved it.
Yep. They have high-speed trains, they have local trains, they have subway trains.
And those train stations are to be amazed.
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Christine. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Lots of familiar faces. Jill, Linda, Jeannie, 77 Beverly. Leona, Gina, hi, and Gina and Regina. Hi, Regina. And Virginia.
Hi.
So far, this is supposedly going to be a big class, and we have Joe with us, who's our TA.
I read this morning that France is going to discontinue flights where they have local train routes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I had an ambition for many, many years since I first heard about it was to take the TGV, the Très Grand Vitesse. And it took me a while to finally get on it. And in 2018, when I flew to Paris and took a train to, the goal was to get to the town of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to start the Camino de Santiago. And I took the high-speed train from Paris airport to Bayona. And unfortunately, it rained the whole way and I didn't really appreciate it. And I was jet lagged, stack that on top of it. So another time. I love the high-speed trains. I've been in high-speed trains through Germany as well and Switzerland. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you with us this afternoon to talk a little bit about slow travel. And you can use the chat today if you'd like to tell us where you're from. You can also use the chat. I encourage us to ask questions or make comments. Joe, who's our TA, will gather up the questions. And you are the beta users. This is the first time this class has ever happened. It will become a regular class, probably once a month. We'll do this for a while until no one else is interested in taking it. And part of my ongoing travel series about all things travel. And this is one of my favorite topics, is about how to travel slowly. So you can put in the chat questions, where you're from, and anything you're hoping to get out of it today. I also invite any of you to, if you have ideas, like, Rush, you didn't think of this about slow travel. Oh, hey, that's a great idea, and I can incorporate it into the next time I do the class.
Okay.
So I always look to improve the classes. But as I said earlier, you're the beta users, and we have Ivy Santiago, which is quite a name, with a Paris hat and a, I don't know, Caribbean or South Sea Island background.
I'm not sure. I was trying to get another one, but it wouldn't work for me fast enough. So this is good though.
Well, I'm from somewhere on Earth. And the other day I actually physically went to grab something from behind me that I needed, and someone said it looked like I reached back under the earth and pulled it up and stuck it in front. So I don't know. I've got a background today because I've got too bright of a something coming in behind me. I want to learn how to do one of those out of focus fuzzy backgrounds. So great to have everybody here. You're coming from all over the place. Joanne, as usual, is still in Horseshoe Bay, Texas, which has to be the Gulf Coast. That's the only place I could think of a bay in Texas. No, it's not in the Gulf Coast.
No.
I'm from Texas, but I don't know where that is.
It's up towards Dallas, I believe, sort of Isn't that right?
Joanne's shaking her head. She's going to tell us in a second where it's from when she figures out how to unmute herself.
What's wrong with this? Oh,
Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Gina and
Hello.
Felice and Shirley, John. Great to have you all here.
okay. It's by Austin.
Really? Okay, now explain
Marble Falls.
Horseshoe Bay by Austin.
Well, it's 50 or 60 miles from Austin, but it's by Austin.
Okay.
It's west of Austin, close to Marble Falls.
So is the bay on a river?
There's a river.
Okay.
I think it's called the Colorado River. They call it the LBJ. They have a lot of names for it.
Okay. So it's a bay on a river. See, I stand corrected. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Laura. We'll give about 1 more minute for everyone to join in before we start talking about slow travel versus fast travel. My idea for this came from, I don't have the book here. It's in the other room on a desk. You may have heard of the slow food movement, which is in contrast to fast food, Carlo Petrini. And that's what I think about slow travel is in contrast to gulping down and consuming our travel experiences. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Looks like we've got a full contingent of 25 here. That's great. We might even have some more. And I'll invite you again to put comments or questions in the chat. I'll also stop at the end, of course, and we'll have time to discuss together. Anybody that has ideas along the lines of what I'm talking about and you think that's a good idea for the class, let me know, because this is the first time this class has been done. And as I mentioned to the first people on, you're kind of the beta users. You're the ones that can critique the class the most to make it better for the future. So at the end, when you get the email, following up on the class, you can say, you can rate it 2 stars and say, should have talked about these 4 things. That's what I was expecting. So here's how to make it better next time. You can do whatever you like to tell me how to improve the class. I'm going to share my screen with you. And you should see something that says slow travel, spend less, but have a richer experience. Okay. Christine's giving me the thumbs up. That means we're good. That, by the way, is a picture from a pub in Ireland. And when I talk a bit about the locals later, I'll come back to why I put this picture in here. But my wife and I have traveled a lot and started doing a lot of international travel, especially in the last 10 years, sometimes up to 3 times a year, mostly to Europe, but we've also been down to Colombia. And the next place we go internationally actually will probably be Mexico. We're hoping to go to my daughter's wedding on New Year's Day in Guanajuato State, where my son-in-law is from. Love all those places. There is not enough probably time in my life to get to all the places I'd like to be or go to. But the idea of slow travel is something that she and I have developed over the years through our experiences as we've shared with other people. And part of it is the idea that folks say, where do you get all the money to travel? And we'll say, well, we don't spend as much as you might think. We still have a great time. I'm Russ Eanes, your guide, and there we are. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is in the Shenandoah Valley, Western Virginia. It's between the Blue Ridge and the Allegheny Mountains. I'm a writer, a walker, and a cyclist. I formerly was a book publisher, and my favorite thing as a book publisher was to help authors put their ideas in between the covers of a book. I'm now a full-time guide with Get Set Up. And I love the energy I get and the wisdom I collect from working with older adults like you. Get Set Up helps you learn useful things from people like you so you can do wonderful things. And we learn from each other. Ideally, we can see you when your cameras are on. You may request a recording of this after class. You email help@getsetup.io. And if anyone is joining by live stream, and we are live streaming this today, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. And lastly, Get Setup's not paid to promote any specific products. I'm not sure I'm promoting anything today other than traveling. So anyway, we're strictly an educational organization and want to learn from each other. So what are some of the ideas that I have about slow travel? Well, the first one is what I call living like a local. And if you know Rick Steves, he talks about being a temporary local. And starting about 2014, 2015, my wife and I decided that rather than renting a car or taking a bus or train and staying a place for a day or two, we would go somewhere and we would stay a week and we would rent an apartment or a room. And you could do that through Airbnb. There's other ways you can do it, by the way. Booking.com many times has guest apartments, and there are many others. Those are just two that I mentioned because I use them the most. We like to rent an apartment or a room in a house where we can make our own meals. And when we make our own meals, a couple different things happen. One, we save money, and because we're going to have to make meals at home. And the second reason is we get to shop in the local grocery store. So this picture right here is a place that we stayed in Scotland. We decided we were going to spend a week near Edinburgh. And we did rent a car this time. And we stayed in this place right here that shows right in the smack on the front, that white building. And with a nice duplex. And we were on the top floor. We had 3 rooms all to ourselves and a kitchen. And we looked south out of the top window. You can't see it here, but right across the Firth of Forth to Edinburgh, which was about 10 miles away across, maybe not even that far, maybe 5 miles away across the Firth of Forth, which is, the Firth is a big inlet from the ocean in Scotland. And one of our favorite things is like, okay, let's go to the grocery store. We love to go to grocery stores in other countries and shop and see what they're like. So should have a picture here of a typical grocery store, my wife's favorite aisle, which is where the chocolate is located. And, first thing we'll do, we'll have some ideas of some things we want to cook with, but we just go in and we start strolling the aisles. Now, what do they have here? My wife loves to discover how cheap chocolate is in Europe. This was, by the way, pre-Brexit. I'm not even sure where this store is. I think this might be in France or somewhere, but we love to go in the grocery stores to just learn what kind of foods do they have. And we're always surprised when we find foods which seem kind of expensive in our country. And we go there and like they're dirt cheap. An example is if you go to France, where there's like, we were driving between Alsace and Paris, and we stopped in a region that is famous for its brie. And we went into a local store and we found you could buy brie or all these other French cheeses for practically nothing, which they would cost a lot of money in our grocery store. So we thought that was a lot of fun to go there for that reason alone. So number one, live like a local. So we like to stay, part of our deep travel is we like to stay in a neighborhood. So we also don't stick out necessarily as tourists, and we get to see how the locals live. And we love to see what's in their grocery stores and what's in their cafes, in their neighborhoods, not the places that cater to locals. And I've done this we've done this in Switzerland, Germany, France, Spain, anywhere we've had, England, Ireland, that we've had a chance to spend a week. And it saves money, but it's also fun just to see how they shop and what their neighborhoods are like. When I was a book publisher, I used to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair every year. And it's like the place where all the publishers in the world come together. It's an enormous convention center. And a lot of the other American publishers all stayed in a hotel about 15 miles outside the city. And they took the train in together and they went into the same section of the convention center, and they did their displays. And then they got in the train, they went back to the hotel and all stayed together. And they mostly just got to know other Americans. Instead, I stayed across town in an Airbnb and just in a room and in a regular old neighborhood where all the Germans lived, and took the subway to and from the book fair. And I actually got to and from faster, but I just enjoyed the experience because every morning I got to go into a German bakery and not stand out as a tourist. So that's number one, live like a local. Number two, we got a little bit ahead here. And the next thing is to walk, bike, or take local transit, for example, subways or buses. And again, that's how the locals are getting around. And this I'm thinking about is in contrast to renting a car. It is okay to rent a car when you go to another country. I've done it plenty. But my wife and I have decided, I think after the last time, it's been quite a few years now, about 4 years since we've rented a car somewhere, maybe 5. That we didn't want to do that anymore because number one, there's expense and time. And there are places you want to go where a car rental is necessary. So we toured Ireland in a car because the Irish don't quite have the train system that they have in the UK. And there were a lot of places we wanted to see that were out in the countryside. Now, however, since then we take the train or the bus or our feet or a bike, wherever we are. And it takes us a little longer to get there. But you know what? When you're not driving, you can really take in the scenery, which is another thing we found, that you can really take in the scenery. And by the way, it's less expensive. And if you are a senior, which I am, you can often get a senior pass in these other countries for their transit. And in fact, in a lot of these countries, like I think England or France, anywhere in the Eurozone, often a senior is someone 60 or 62. You don't have to wait till you're 65, like in the US, to be considered a bona fide senior. So that's another big plus. So we like to take the transit. I think this is a train in England, and they've got these electric trains. And we discovered in England, the trains go pretty much everywhere. And in many countries, the buses run way into rural areas. So in 2012, I was in Northern England with my youngest son, who at the time was 13 or 14. And we decided we were staying in York, which is a fairly sizable city. And we decided we wanted to go up to Hadrian's Wall, which is way, about an hour and a quarter north of there. And we took a train to Newcastle on Tyne. And then we took another local train out to some town. And then we caught a local bus. And I had researched this and found that you could take a local bus in the countryside out to Hadrian's Wall. So we didn't need a car or anything. And it was very relaxing, and we could look at the scenery the whole time. In fact, in London, my favorite, if you want to get around fast in London, the tube is the way to go. But otherwise, if we're not in such a hurry, I like to get in a London tour bus and get up into these double-decker buses and get up and sit in the very front, because a lot of the Londoners don't do that. They just get in the bus because they're home. They're going from one place to another. So they're not sitting in the top front of the bus, which is a big bubble, window. And you can see neighborhood after neighborhood as you're going through London. So that's a lot of fun. And it's cheaper than the subway. But even out in the country, they have these buses. When my wife and I were in Germany in 2016, we, again, for the book fair, we decided we wanted to go tour a winery that was in a old medieval monastery about an hour away. And we took a train to this small village again, and there got on a local rural bus that ran us out to that monastery about 5 miles. So very relaxing. We could look at the scenery, and we had a great experience, and I didn't have to worry about driving the car or finding directions, and she didn't have to worry about giving me directions. Another tip is learn the local market days in cities or towns before you go. So this is actually the market in Mainz, which is a city near Frankfurt, a beautiful old city on the Rhine River. And every Tuesday, they have the local market. It's huge. It fills the central square, and some cities have markets more days than one. And we found that we just love to tour the market. We love it just to walk around and see what it is they have. We might buy something to eat or drink that we can have later. We might buy a souvenir or something we want to take home. We like what we call practical souvenirs, like something you can eat or something you can use when you get home. And I had known that Tuesday was market day in Mainz because I had researched a little bit about Mainz in a guidebook, and it said Tuesday is market day. And so I actually flew to Frankfurt the day that I took this picture on a Sunday and got into Frankfurt Monday and spent a day acclimating. And then I had a couple of days before I was at the book fair, and I just took Tuesday and I took the train over to Mainz. And I said, that's the day they have their market. I want to just walk around their market. That is really a lot of fun, to walk around a foreign market. So we've learned where these are in cities where we've gone, in France and England and Germany and Scotland and Ireland, wherever they are. If there's a local market, we like to go there. And that's where the locals are buying their stuff. They're not just oriented toward tourists. So you can, if you have a good guidebook, and Rick Steves guidebooks are good. We're all talking about Rick Steves tomorrow night on Get Set Up. And I know Joanne Thomas has got one of those lucky seats to sit in the Zoom call with Rick. He'll tell you. I'm pretty sure Rick will tell you when the local market is. Okay, another way to save some money and have a richer experience is take a city tour. They're quite often free. So again, my wife and I started doing this in 2015 when we were in Ireland. I'll tell you about some of these tours. This one right here is our tour guide in the city of York. We spent a week in York in 2016 because we wanted to explore the whole area, all in that part of Yorkshire. We were big fans of, I'm sorry, I've just drawn a blank on his name, the veterinarian. Someone help me.
James Herriot.
James Herriot. We're big fans of James Herriot. We wanted to see Yorkshire, the Yorkshire Dales. And so we went to several other cities while we were in York, including Durham. And we also went out to the coast, and we took a bus, by the way, through the Yorkshire Dales, which was fabulous. Cheap way to get there. I didn't have to worry about driving. But when we were in York, we went into the visitor center, and they said, every day at 11:30 to 2:30, there's a free city tour. And we said, where do we meet? And this guy in the middle here with a beard is our guide. And he told us, you can walk through a city, and New York is a very old city. There are buildings there from medieval times. You can walk through a city like that and have no clue what went on in some of those buildings once upon a time. For example, he pointed out one building where Guy Fawkes had been, the guy who was famous for trying to blow up Parliament, Guy Fawkes Day, where he was born and raised in York. I think, we're looking at an ancient gate to the city, and he was explaining to us that apparently there was a law in the books in the Middle Ages that if someone from Scotland came into York and was armed, that there was a law that you could kill him. And he said that law is still in the books today. So you learn all this fun stuff by taking the tour, and they hit the good spots. And yes, it's for tourists, but you got a local person explaining this. And we did this a year later, when we went in, actually that same fall, we went to Munich, and we went into the visitor center. We said, where's the local tour? By the way, the tours are free. Now, we always give them some money at the end because it's worth it, but they don't charge to take the tour. And we had a great 3-hour tour of Munich he took us to places that we wouldn't have learned about or seen otherwise, including some tips about how if you're touring Munich, a lot of the tour is about beer. But the year before, we'd been in Ireland, and our bed and breakfast host said, there's a guy that gives a walk to the Cliffs of Moher, which, if you know Ireland, that's the famous cliffs on the western coast. It's about 8 kilometers, and he'll walk you up there. It'll take about 2 hours, and he'll explain everything all about it. So we went on a tour with him, and he was a local guy that told us all about the cliffs and showed us a farm where he had grown up. So we've done this again and again, and we found they're free. We always give money, but there's not necessarily a charge, and they're done by locals. So you get a rich experience, and you learn something about a place that you can then explore later. Shirley, did you have a comment?
A question. Okay, so I haven't done as much travel as you at all, but it seems to me that we've gone on tours, but we always have to go on a tour that we paid for, go with a bunch of people. It's very commercial and pretty expensive, and your whole schedule revolves around it. I'd like to know how you found that.
Found which thing? The tour?
Did you go to the Chamber of Commerce, or how do you end up?
No, there's always a tourist information office in sizable cities, and that's pretty small, actually. Just look on a map. A good guidebook will have a map, and there'll be a little thing that says TI, which is tourist information.
Okay.
And the reason we went in there is because a guidebook doesn't always have the most up-to-date information, even if it's published that year. Those things can change.
Yeah.
So we always head right to the tourist information office, get a map. And we like to start off with the tours because the tours find us stuff that we want to go look at later.
Mhm.
So York, for example, York has a fabulous cathedral, and I'll probably do a whole thing about cathedrals in England because that's one of my favorite places to go visit. I like the architecture and the history, but there's so much more to see in York. And by taking the tour with this guy, we had more ideas than we would know what to do with in the next 3 or 4 days. And the same thing happened to us in Munich. The guy told us a bunch of stuff about a particular beer house, Brauhaus, and a brewing house that we decided to go have lunch in. And he told us some particular things about what lunch to order. See, so, and that guy was a local, though I will disclose here that he was originally from England. He'd been living in Munich for about 5 years. So he had, of course, excellent English, but most of the Germans have excellent English too. I also had an informal tour through Hamburg with a local. That wasn't a regular guided tour. Our local just took us to all the sites. He wanted to take us where the Beatles had played and back in the 1960s before they were big. So yeah, a good tourist information office should be able to tell you when you can catch a local city tour. And they're often not that they're long. I mean, they're not just like a 1-hour tour. This places all the ones I've taken that I can think of lasted up to 3 hours. And I'm not even talking about ones that my wife and I took in Colombia. We went to the coffee region in Colombia and we did some coffee farm tours. And those were also several hours long. So again, it's really worth it.
I use TripAdvisor, and I love free tours. And so most big cities have them, and I find them on TripAdvisor. I just look for what tours they offer. And if you have a really good tour guide, sometimes you'll want to do one of their paid tours, something else that they offer if they do a good job and they have some interesting tours. So I think it's a great way to get, restaurant recommendations and, other, kind of more inside advice.
Very good point, Jill. See, that's one thing I'll put to improve it. Look in TripAdvisor. I do like TripAdvisor. And that's one thing you can search for, because you can also search into the details in TripAdvisor. You can say like City Tours York or York, UK. So you don't get the free city tour of York, Pennsylvania by accident. Anyway, so see, I'll add that to the notes next time. TripAdvisor, good place to look for it. And
also I found out that I have some really fond memories of just asking somebody locally while I'm in the city, where do you like to eat? And you find some really cool places that I just
yes,
tell you, but I really like, just talking to the locals and some real gems that way.
Which is a really nice reason for getting a guest apartment or room even. When we were in York, we stayed in an Airbnb and we just had a room in a huge house. So we had shared kitchen. And the owner told us, I think he's the one that actually might have told us about that city tour. I'm not sure we learned that one. He might have said, oh, there's a free city tour, by the way, leaves at 11:30. So we said, well, we'll do that one. And yeah, tells you what restaurants to go to. You also learn what the local culinary specialties are. And that's, I'm going to do another class I call Top Travel Tips. And that's one thing I'm going to give people a tip on is whenever you're staying somewhere, as long as it's something you feel you can eat, find out what the local culinary specialty is, because that's a real rich experience. Okay, another thing is get to know the locals. This is just as Shirley was saying, and where they go. So this is a little interesting picture. So my wife and I spent 6 weeks in Spain. I walked the Camino de Santiago, and she came and joined me the last 10 days. And we were flying home from Madrid. So we took a flight to Madrid and stayed overnight and then left the next morning. So we left Madrid early, like on a Sunday morning. So we had all day to go into the city. And of course, we went into the center plaza where there are all the tourist restaurants and we had a meal. But then we decided to go explore. We had eaten because we were pretty hungry. And we probably walked about 6 blocks away from the center of the city and we discovered this old market. So in Europe, there's a lot of these markets that are completely in glass, so you can see in them. And this is where they in the past or in the present still, many of them are still current. They sell food. And the food's mostly, stuff to take home, meat and cheeses and breads and whatever, but this particular place had been turned into a night spot. And if you know Spain, they have what are called tapas, which are these little sort of appetizers that they have with drinks, and often groups go in and they share tapas together. Well, we discovered this place is where all the locals were. And we went in there and we said, whoa, this was much better than what we just had. That was what they serve the tourists. This is what the locals have. And we kicked ourselves for not having found this. Now, I don't think we could have necessarily found it, but it was just several blocks away, about 5 or 6 block walk. I'm using American terms, blocks, to give you a general idea how far it was to walk. And we discovered the same thing in Paris. We were in 2013, we were in Paris for about 5 days, and we stayed in the left bank and in the university district. And a lot of it's very touristy around there. And we found that if we walked about 4 or 5 blocks down Saint-Germain, we found where all the Parisian locals were going to shop and to eat. And it was much better than the places that the tourists had in what I call the tourist area of central Paris. So again, from now on, we see, we've got to try and identify those places before we go, so that when we get there, we know what to go look for. And I don't think we're really prepared for what we were going to look for in Madrid. I've been gone for 6 weeks and I've been walking somewhere different every day. So probably wasn't thinking it through very clearly, but that's a recommendation to get to know the locals and where they go. So yeah, Shirley, you have the right idea. And if you're staying in a guest house, a guest apartment, or a room in a house, you're with locals and you can ask them those questions. And last thing is give yourself enough time. Remember, you can't do it all. So if you've been one of my other classes, you've heard me talk about tea and scones in the UK. And I like to do hikes and walks, and the towns and villages are close enough together. And we always spy out a place about early afternoon where we can go get some tea and scones, because they make them in England like no place else, like a big fat biscuit. Only that's a very poor way to describe a good scone in England. And there's a sense when we travel that we will kind of want to experience everything. And I feel that one of the best things to do is tell yourself, well, if there's more here than I can experience this time, that's okay, I'll come back. Or say to yourself, you know what? I had a great time. I experienced everything I could. Couldn't do it all this time, or maybe can't do it all ever, but it was a wonderful experience. And just remember that it'll make the experience richer, thinking about what you gained versus what you didn't experience yet. So that's what I tell people if they want to have a richer experience. Now, one last thing, I kind of threw this in at the end today as I was getting this ready. Learn about the history of where you're staying. And this picture right here is from Kilmainham Prison in Dublin. And I mentioned before, I was in Ireland in 2 weeks in 2015 with my wife and my sister. And my sister likes all the stuff we like, and we like history and food and culture wherever we go. This is where the idea of slow travel comes from. And we didn't do a tour in Dublin. We did some other things in Dublin. We only had about 3 days, but we found out there was a tour of Kilmainham. My sister found out there was a tour of Kilmainham Prison. And Kilmainham Prison is where the British imprisoned all the Irish rebels, going as far back as like the 18th century or 17th centuries, where they always ended up. And there was a rebellion in Ireland in 1916. And actually, if you're in the center of Ireland, of Dublin, which is where we were staying, we stayed about a block away from the old post office, which is sort of the center of the rebellion. You can still see bullet pock marks on the columns. Someone said to us, you can take a tour of Kilmainham, and if you go out there, it's kind of like their patriotic story, because there was this uprising in 2016 that was put down within about 5 days by the British, and they arrested all the ringleaders and they executed them at this spot right here. So we're looking at a wall where they executed, and there's a plaque marking the spot where they executed the ringleaders and firing squad. There were about 7 or 8 were executed. And there was such an outcry when they executed with firing squad, all the ringleaders, that very quickly they stopped, and they stopped doing any more executions, and that actually turned the local population against the British. Before that, they'd been upset with the rebels. And we just had the most impassioned tour guide that took us on a guide of a tour of the prison. It still looks like it did back then. It's pretty dirty and moldy. And she told us which prisoners were in which prison cell. And then they took us out to the courtyard, and they showed the spot where they'd done the executions. And it was hearing her story, you got a sense of the deep passion that the Irish people have. And I love the Irish people. I'm part Irish. My wife is a Fitzgerald, so she's very much Irish, and we felt quite at home there. But we really took the chance to learn about the history, and this was a part of history. You know, I'm very much into ancient Celtic history and medieval history, but I knew about this part of the history. But this was a part that I found the most fascinating to learn about, and so I was really glad that I took the time to, while I was there, to learn about their history from the locals, from the people firsthand, because you get a sense of who they are as a people by doing that. So that's just one last thing I'd say to make it richer. And again, this was a tour. I think this might have cost something to go into there, but not much. And there's many tours that can be offered that can cost you, but this one of the Kilmainham prison gave us a sense of history like very few other tours can give you. So I am going to just mention a couple other related classes before I pull us back for some discussion. Tonight, we're going to do island hopping on our ongoing Rick Steves series. And tomorrow night is Rick Steves, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you're not in the class as Zoom, you can see it live streamed on Get Set Up TV and on Facebook. And tomorrow, I'll be doing a class on biking Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. on the Great Allegheny Passage and the C&O towpath, completely off road on trails. So at 11 o'clock tomorrow, I'll be talking about that. Please come and join us. And I have some upcoming classes. There is one on island hopping. Of course, I should have some, for too long, a class on cycling for fun and fitness. So I'm going to stop the share and bring everybody back into view. Looks like we got quite a few people today. Really nice seeing you all. What comments, questions do you have about deep travel? Slow travel, pardon me.
I wanted to ask you about Dublin. You just took a tour of the prison there. Are there any other tours or things to do in Dublin that you would suggest? Or
Oh, there are so many things to do in Dublin. My wife and sister and I walked along the river, and there is if I had time to show you all the photos today, I would, but there's a beautiful monument to the birth of the Irish Republic near about 2 blocks away from the river. I keep using American terms, 2 blocks, because a lot of Europe isn't laid out in blocks. But right on the river, there is a famine memorial, which is quite moving. So we knew about some of these spots, and we just kind of want to walk through them. And then we also went over to the library at Trinity College in Dublin, where they have the Lindisfarne Gospels, which is this beautiful old illuminated manuscript. That was just kind of self-tour we took ourselves on. My wife also likes to look for particular kinds of restaurants because we are vegetarian and sometimes we even eat a bit vegan. And she found a fabulous place that served that kind of food, and she enjoyed finding that restaurant. We also enjoyed going into a fabric store and buying some tweed. She made me a vest out of tweed. But there are also city tours, and that was one time we didn't take a city tour in Dublin because of our limited time, and we knew we wanted to kind of walk around on foot, and we knew the things we wanted to see. But there are plenty of tours in Dublin. Absolutely beautiful city. I love Dublin.
the smoking and in the pubs and all, is there a lot of smoking, the restaurants and the pubs and places there?
There is some smoking, yes. I don't think they smoke inside, but I'm not sure. They definitely smoke outside. And the Europeans do smoke more than Americans.
Okay.
I was going to make just to make a comment. See, I need to mute somebody here. I'm getting feedback about Ireland, the very first picture I showed was some musicians in an Irish pub. And one thing we found, again, this is where you find this out by talking to the locals. In the restaurants in the evenings, there's Irish musicians playing for the tourists between 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in those hours. 10 o'clock, the musicians all go to a pub and they play for themselves. Well, that's what we found out. And our best experiences was going into the local Irish pubs after 10 o'clock and listening to the musicians play. And they'll even hand you a guitar if you play and ask you to play something for them. So that's, again, a thing you learn as a local. Was a very rich experience. Now, Virginia, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that the tour of the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin it's worth doing. It's the view from up there. You can see the whole city and the river, and then you get a pint of beer at the end of the tour.
That's right. I didn't mention, for example, I've done a whiskey tour. That's not a free tour. My oldest son and I did a whiskey tour not in Dublin, but we did one in Scotland, because that is the national drink in Scotland is whiskey. And there's a reason why.
I see that there is a History Fridays, Celtic Nations. Are you facilitating that class?
I will. I'm doing that Friday. I'm doing one on Thursday, Wednesday, every day this week. I won't be facilitating Rick Steves, but there is something each day. Yes, check the schedule. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll be doing History Fridays, the Celtic Nations. Yes.
I have two questions. One is, will they be recording the Rick Steves? I really wanted to go, but I have some commitment that I'm supposed to go to.
It
Will
will
they-
be recorded.
So will
And
they-
the best way to find that recording is to go to the Get Set Up Facebook page, where you will find the events, and they're always showing something. Like this class is being live streamed on Facebook. And once they put it out on Facebook, it stays there, I'm told, forever. We don't know yet. Facebook Live hasn't been around that long. But I've gone to Facebook Live events after they've happened, and I've watched them. So you can see the whole thing there,
Good.
Shirley.
Is it too late to get on that Zoom class with Rick Steves for tomorrow night?
It is too late. Sorry, Ivy. Shirley, did you
I
have another
met him
question?
once. Met him in Houston.
So I think people can still watch it somehow, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The live, it's not too late. It's just getting into the audience, right?
Right.
Yes, you can all watch it live streaming on Get Set Up TV. So if you go to the Get Set Up webpage, on the left, there's a navigation, and the third button down is TV. Click on that and you'll see whatever is live streaming. So for example, this would be live streaming. If you clicked on that now,
Right.
you'd see this class. And Rick Steves will be there at that time live. You can also, again, as I said, find on the Facebook page live. And again, the recording stays on Facebook. So you don't have to, if you can't see it at the time, you can go find it. Surely either later that evening or the next day, just scroll down till you find that event.
Good. The other question I had was, I've watched Rick Steves sometimes, and I always thought it was kind of fun to stay at Airbnbs. He says he's not too keen on it because I like the idea of saving money and still being there. He says bed and breakfast or hotels because we're hurting their economy. Have you heard him talk about that?
I haven't heard him talk about that. I've read critiques of Airbnb, which are valid. That in certain cities, Airbnbs are being created in such a way that they push out opportunities for locals to have their own housing. People are renting out their places to Airbnb because they can make more money instead of making them available to locals. I understand that. Actually, a lot of bed and breakfasts, at least in the US, are on Airbnb. So when you're an Airbnb, it's worth digging into the host and the place a little bit. Every Airbnb I've stayed in recent years has either been a place which was already a rental, or somebody was gone for 6 months traveling the world and renting out their place. That's where I've stayed those. So I do understand that concern. And I think Rick Steves has a valid concern. I don't think it totally invalidates Airbnb, however.
How do you research like that? I don't know how.
Do you have a membership in Airbnb? It's free.
I have gone to plenty of Airbnbs in the past before COVID.
You mean, how do you research the place?
I try, it's been a while. I just try to Google and then I try to look at where it's located, what's going on, what the ratings are. That's what I've done.
If you drill into the hosts about them, you get a little bit more of a sense. And I always prefer, my preference is to stay with someone where they're renting out several rooms in their house. And the place I mentioned that my wife stayed in York, we had folks from all over the world staying with us that day in just in a regular home, very large home in a neighborhood. I think it had about six bedrooms. And the man who lived there just lived with his daughter. And they were renting out rooms. I think they had 2 rooms in the top floor where they stayed. And the rest was Airbnb. And we had people from Asia, from Australia, New Zealand, and we were there from the US. So it is worth looking into the host and why they're renting their place.
And Rick Steves in his books, I mean, he doesn't have Airbnb recommendations, obviously, but he recommends in his books a lot of smaller family-owned hotels or bed and breakfasts. And I've stayed at a few of them. They're very good. Usually they're in good locations and his recommendations are good. So if you just want a good recommendation from him, his guidebooks are excellent for that.
His guidebooks do give good recommendations. And, I'll say, after I said stay in a guest apartment, I could point out that when my wife and daughter and I were in Paris, we stayed in a very nice hotel on the left bank, and where we had breakfast every morning. And I got to know the owner, and he was the one that told me about all the places to go that were away from the tourists. And there was also a kitchen facility in the hotel it was a fairly small hotel. We could use the kitchen to store our own food and make some of our own things. So our pattern is we tend to like to eat breakfast like in the hotel if they have it, is if part of the what it costs to stay there, and then we get our own fixings for either supper or lunch. Suppers are often a little cheaper. Lunches are often a little cheaper than dinners, and it's the same thing or the same amount. But you want to sample the food in the restaurant, so that's why we like to do a variety of ways of eating. And sometimes we get picnic food, sandwiches and things we can make to take with us while we're touring.
Nice.
And that's where the tourist information comes in. We traveled through southern Germany. We had no reservations anywhere. All we had was rail pass, but we knew what cities we wanted to go to. So we just stopped at the tourist information center and told them where we wanted to stay, what type of place. And we'd take the bus to wherever they told us. They'd call and get the rooms for us. So it was very easy traveling.
And I've also stayed in hostels. They're called youth hostels. Well, these days, they're not all youth there. Last time I was in Edinburgh, I stayed 3 nights at a hostel, and I had quite a fascinating mixture of people there. And there was a kitchen I could make my own food. And I think I had my lunches out. And I ate suppers. In the Europe, a lot of the grocery stores have pre-prepared sandwiches and salads that, I'll be quite honest, are better than what you typically get in the U.S., though ours are getting better. Many supermarkets have picked up their quality in there. And I would often go into the grocery store when I spent a week in England hiking, and I just stayed in one place and I went in a different direction every day on a hike. And I just went into the grocery store, which was a quarter mile away, and just bought my lunch, everything I need to make a lunch, and including well-prepared sandwiches for a very reasonable price to take with me on my hike. So
nice.
I was going to say on TripAdvisor, I also, the main thing I use it for is finding places to stay. And it's a great resource for the little guest houses, the small family-owned hotels. I found a lot of wonderful places, and I always look at Rick Steves if it's in Europe, because I've stayed some really terrific places from his list. And then I was going to do a shout out to the hostels as well. A lot of hostels, youth hostels, have private rooms. And so you can get a single, you can get a double, you can have your own room. You don't have to be, bunking with a bunch of kids, So you can have ones with your own bathroom. Sometimes it's a shared bathroom if you don't mind that. And they're usually kind of Spartan rooms, but I'd rather hang out in the common areas where you could talk to people and find out more about kind of what's going on. I mean, I'm not somebody who likes to stay in my room. So hostels have been a really good economical way to travel and be able to have your own food and snacks and stuff.
Yeah, good advice, Jill.
Did you stay at any of the albergues when you were walking the Camino?
I almost only stayed in albergues.
Okay.
That was my favorite part of the experience. It
Yeah.
wasn't for everybody, but I stayed in rooms with hundreds of people sometimes and people snoring.
Yeah.
But it was-
Well, there are also places that are licensed by the government called Casa Rurales, and they're bed and breakfast, but they are government approved places, so they're safe to stay in for anybody
That's right.
going to do that.
There's every level of accommodations, including 5-star hotels on the Camino de Santiago. Yep. Whatever price you want to pay, including places that are donation only. Christine, were you going to say something?
Yeah, on my 2 trips to Paris, the first time it was 7 days in Paris with Rick Steves, guided tour, wonderful hotel. And then I went back the next year by myself as a single woman, picked my own hotel. But I never ate in restaurants because I was either doing museums, I was walking to and from the museums or taking the subway. But about the food, because I didn't want to just sit in restaurants, because I think in Europe people tend to sit and want to just be there. I just wanted to eat. So I would go into delicatessens and I would just point. I speak in a little French, but I could still point. They were wonderful. I ate lots of quiche, a lot of flan. And so I would just get my breakfast and my dinner at the same time, go to my hotel room, eat what I ever decided I was eating for dinner in my hotel room. And then I would have in the morning, because I really love eggs, and I would either buy hard-boiled eggs at the delicatessen or quiche, and that's what I would have for breakfast. And always the hotel provided the tea. And if I wanted to eat in the hotel and pay the extra, but it was more expensive, of course, than just going to a bakery, but getting some croissants, getting some quiche. So as a single person traveling on my own, that worked out really well. And then just buying things between museums or eating at the museums worked out really well. So my second trip was 10 days in Paris. And yeah, and I did great. And I think I saw almost every museum.
Wow.
With the museum pass.
And Christine, you've given advice on a very good way to travel, which is you went once on a tour and you kind of said, okay, I understand Paris. I know how to get around. I feel comfortable with this. I'll go back by myself. And Christine, I am going to be doing a whole class on traveling solo. So make sure you sign up for that class.
Absolutely.
Come to it and share about your experiences, because many people are understandably scared about traveling solo. And I've assembled a panel of 3 people that travel solo a lot. And they can tell you how it's not as scary as you might think. So,
and I was a flight attendant also. So that means I was solo all over the country.
There you go. There you go.
So I'm happy to share my experiences of ending up in a city I've never been in almost every time and having to decide what to do while I'm there for 24 to 36 hours. So,
wow.
When I was in Paris, we walked around and there was a restaurant, and in the window, it had a menu. It said, "This is what Rick Steves eats when he dines here." And then we would walk further, and there was a street, and it was Rue Rick Steves. It was really popular in that part of Paris.
So there's the Rue Saint-Jacques, which will get you to Santiago, and the Rue Rick Steves, which will show you where he was. Great. We got one last comment before we have to tie things up. Anybody else have something you're itching to share? Or I appreciate your feedback at the end about the class, how I can make it better. And you were a delightful group. I enjoyed having you all. I'm sorry if you didn't all get a chance to say something, but we'll be doing this class again. Keep checking back on the schedule. I sure have fun with it. And sometime maybe I'll get my wife when she's not so busy to come join in, and you can hear from her about a lot of this because she's the one that had a lot of the ideas. So
It would be great. Not there's anything wrong with you, Russ, but it's just kind of fun to hear the.
oh, listen, she's the better half. She's the better half. So there's no question about that. Well, thanks everybody.
Russ, I think that's a great idea to for you to do a workshop on traveling solo.
Oh,
Because a lot of women are widowed now, and you know, and I'm one of them, and I'm scared to death, you know, to travel, but I love to travel, you know. And I had a traveling partner, but she's sick now, you know. So that solo thing sounds great to me.
well, you know, we had someone here in the class at the beginning, and I don't see her now. Regina, she is hopefully, if I can get in touch with her, is going to be one of our panelists because she went to Taipei for a month by herself.
Wow.
And we've had some all the people that are going to come are learners two of them are learners. Another one is a person I know, a woman who's walked in Spain and all the various caminos about 14 times. And she's going to talk a bit about why she decided that at age 60, she would start doing that. And why she doesn't
when
plan.
is this? When is this?
It's not scheduled yet. It's not scheduled. So keep an eye on that schedule.
Yes.
Nate, we'll get that scheduled soon. I don't want to compete with Rick Steves right now. So it should be I think we'll do that class regularly. And
Yeah, that'd be very interesting to me also.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend as we've talked about, as a single person going on a tour the first time with a reputable tour company. Rick Steves is wonderful. He's here in the Seattle area. I put his link there. But he, you know, I was with a group of 24 people from all over the United States. I felt very safe.
Thanks, Christine.
Very
Thank you
good.
very much. I'm going to have to say Auf Wiedersehen, adieu, and tschüss to everybody. And
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Adios.
Adios. And I might see you back here at
Adios.
7:30 when we do some more island hopping with Rick Steves.
I'll be
Good
there.
night. Good afternoon, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Russ.
thank you
Nice.
very much, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.